Today I want to talk about a list, or give you a list that is titled Characteristic Mistakes of Beginners. Now I think it's I just thought this was very interesting. I got this list from the person that taught the class before me. I've changed it very little. I changed the formatting of my list. I might have changed a couple of the illustrations because I didn't know what he was talking about, because they were his illustrations. But as it turns out, in my schooling, in my postgraduate schooling, I took a class, and it was the worst class I ever took. Nah, not the worst class I ever took. It was the worst class in my doctoral education schooling. And it wasn't because it was like bad material and all that. It was just very boring. And the guy never answered one of my questions. Never. It was a video correspondence class. And it was very hard. I had another video correspondence class that was he didn't answer my questions either, but he was more interesting to listen to. But anyway, the class was Psychology of Education, and I'm going along listening to all these things about the different things and whatever. And some of it I'd heard before, some of it I hadn't. But all of a sudden, one day, he gets up and he says, "Now today we're going to give some characteristic mistakes of beginning teachers." And I thought, I think I've heard that list. I think I've heard this before. And sure enough, almost every single single item in this list that I got from the guy that taught before me, he had in his list. So, and the guy that taught before me, he got his postgraduate education from Pensacola Christian College. Okay. I got my postgraduate education from Bob Jones University. But the same list is coming from both of those. I think this list is just kind of like, everybody makes a list like this and includes it in their psychology of education stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. But I wouldn't be surprised if I went to Indiana University, took Introduction to Educational Psychology, that there would be a lesson on characteristic mistakes of beginners. They might not have the same things on their list, but I'll bet it's the same. So there's just a little story to go along with our list for today. And the first thing is, since I have it, not securing the attention of the students before making announcements or beginning discussions. Okay, so the first mistake is not securing attention before making announcements or beginning discussions. The most important part of that point is not securing attention. Not securing attention. This is breaking the second law of teaching. You don't have to write that down. But you can. I'm just connecting it to something we're going to learn later on. The second law of teaching is the law of the learner, which says the pupil or the student must attend with interest to the lesson being taught. If you don't have their attention, you're breaking the second law of teaching. But beginning teachers, here's one. Let's see here. Let's see what you think. What do you think a beginning teacher? Well, let's not do this. Let's say all of you are going to teach. You say, I'm not here to study teach. Doesn't matter. For this class, you're going to teach. What are you going to be most concerned about? All of you have to get up and teach. Don't say, I'm going to be most concerned about getting their attention, because of the point. What are you going to be most concerned about? You're a new teacher. Imagine you're in that situation. What do you think you're going to worry most? Should we say worry? That's a bad word. What are you going to be most concerned about? Okay?
That I'd be able to present the lesson effectively.
To present the lesson effectively. What's the important word there? To me, there's like a lot of important words there. What to you is the most concerning in that? Effectively, that you would be effective. Okay? Somebody else. All of us are different, so we might, like, Mary.
That the students learn.
You'd be concerned, okay, so because you're concerned about what that the students would learn, what are you going to be concerned about your own performance there?
That you're interesting, I guess.
Oh, being interesting. Okay, you'd want to make sure that you're interesting. You'd be worried about being interesting. We don't know for sure. This is hypothetical, right? So, Sarah. Sarah back there, blonde Sarah. Sarah O.
I was thinking that making sure that they understand what you're talking about. Like that's what I read.
Making sure that they understand. So if you're concerned about making sure that they understand what you're talking about, what do you think you'd be spending a lot of time doing?
Planning and preparing.
No, when you're planning and preparing. Okay. There's not any right or wrong answer. I just want to think, what do you think? Megan?
Well, you'll spend a lot of time explaining.
A lot of time explaining when you're in the classroom? Think so? Anyone else? Anybody think of other things? Something else? Reviewing? What about reviewing? You'd be concerned about reviewing?
I was just going
You're
with what they-
following along with that. Okay. All right. I don't know, but it seems to me most new teachers are most concerned with making sure that they get across what they have to get across. Okay? They're very, very concerned about the content, would be the word. I want to make sure they understand. I want to make sure I'm effective. Effective in what? Effective in them learning the content. What did you say, Mary? That you'd be interesting. Okay, why do you want to be interesting? So that they will listen to what you have to say, and so then they will get what you have to say. That is generally a real big thing, and I don't want to minimize it. It's very important that we know our content and that we deliver content and that they receive it, and do more than just receive it, right? If we're talking on what is our receiving. Oh man, I've just slipped into accidental review. Receiving, responding. What's next? Oh, you guys got to know this. Receiving, responding, organizing, valuing, characterization. What are you talking about, Dr. Vogelin? Class, what was I talking about? Something from like 3 weeks ago. The affective domain, All right. So you're going to need to know that. Speaking of that, next Monday is Doomsday, right? Doomsday, and it's really a very easy test because we're wired to just remember lists, and that's mostly what this test is. Okay? We're not little 3rd and 4th graders that just love to remember lists anymore, but that's the way we've been trained that school is supposed to happen is list. And this one is a listing, pretty much. It's a listing test. So that's your review for the test. All right. But the point is, when we're going over our characteristic mistakes of beginners, beginning teachers are really, they're like, I've never taught before. I've never stood before that. I know I went to school for this stuff, but how am I going to get this stuff across to them? And we're really, 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 really focused on our content. So now there's other things in there, but a very lot of these mistakes are related to the idea that we're focused on what we're doing, which is delivering content to the students. Okay? So we come into class. It's very important that we get started. There's a lot to cover, and so we start without the attention of the students. Okay? All right? The second thing is doing too much work and thinking for the students. First of all, what do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say that the teacher does too much work or thinking for the students? Give a chance for people to finish writing, and then they can respond to my question.
Helping helping them learn something, and if they don't understand it, is important to an extent. You can't just give them the answer. Like, for example, if they're trying to figure out a math problem or something, well, maybe the base problem is they don't know what 6 times 7 is. Don't just give them the answer, make them figure it out themselves.
Okay, so you told me what you should do rather than telling me what I meant by that, but that's okay. You were one step ahead of me. You'd like we skipped a step. We're speeding. So, yeah.
I think a lot of times when somebody, in another example, a math example, the teacher will ask a question and then answer it himself.
Sure. Sure.
What do we do here? And then this is what we do. And then repeat that over and over to where the kids just sit there and listen and not really.
Okay. Now, why would we do that? Why would you do that? Why does a teacher do work for the students rather than making them do the work of learning?
It's easier to do it yourself.
It's easier to do it yourself, and what is it?
They want to get through the material.
We've got to get through the material. If I take all day to figure out 6 times 7, I'm already a lesson behind because I taught them 6 times 6 yesterday and it took all day. Right? Okay, so we're under pressure, and it's legitimate pressure to an extent. We're under pressure to make sure they get the content, right? I think I get confused. I'm getting old and deranged, so I don't know if this was last semester or this semester, but what's more important, that they learn how to learn? Okay, this was the Lost Tools of Learning. That they learn how to learn, or that they learn the things that we have for them to learn. Learning to learn is more important, but at the same time, if you come to your principal in May and say, I'll tell you what, these kids, they know how to learn. Well, what have they learned? Well, we spent our whole time in Unit 1. We pretty much got it finished, but they know how to think and they know how to learn. You're going to get in trouble. You might even get fired. Okay? So there's that balance, and there's pressure on us as teachers to get through what we're going to talk about. So when you ask a question, it's much easier just to ask a question or deliver a problem, and then if you see confused looks or maybe just blank stares, that you just work through it, thinking if I model the right thing, they're going to get it. Maybe you're not thinking that. Maybe you're just thinking, here's the answer. But modeling the right answer is you're showing example of the right way to do it. But if you don't, but then they don't know, you don't know that they know how to do it or have even gotten any practice with it. So yes, doing too much work and thinking for pupils is bad. It's a mistake. The third thing, and this is not just a mistake of beginners. I find myself in this class even doing this, and I must stop. Habitually calling on certain few pupils to carry on class discussions. Right, Shem? Joy? Haley? So, what do you think about that, Haley? No, but don't we? Why? Why do we call on a certain few pupils to carry on class discussions? Haley, what do you think?
Because they're willing to answer and they're thinking.
Because they're willing to answer, and you're pretty sure other times when they've answered, they've got the right answer. Okay? So, what are we doing then? We're just playing school. I have a question. I ask the one guy, let's just say it's one, and let's say it's a girl. Or it's a guy. I ask the one guy that knows the answer. He gives me the right answer. I say, that's great, we understand, and then what? We move on, right? Because I got to get through. I'm worried about this content. Or I want to feel successful, right? If somebody gets the right answer, it's like, I taught it well. Even though everyone else in the room is like, what did he say? I don't understand this. So you just ask the one guy that knows, and you feel like you've taught well. Okay? So, that's an easy thing to fall into. All right? The fourth thing. An easy habit to fall into. Number 4, attempting to work with individual students without maintaining control, without maintaining group control. I mentioned this, I think, the last time about when I was talking about monitoring the classroom environment. Remember? So if I'm trying to work, remember I went over here and was working with Devante. I'm attempting to work with him individually, but I lose control of the class. So we have to think about how, if a certain person needs help, how can I do that and still maintain the control of the class? Maybe he's fine not understanding until the class day is over, or until there's a time when it's freer. Maybe he really does need the help. Maybe it is a time when everybody's just working on their own things. If I just work with him, how should I work with him in a way that I can still know what's going on in the classroom? So there's nothing wrong. I think we should be clear. There's nothing wrong with working with individual students. You're going to have to do that. Every single student is going to need help here and there along the way. Some will need more than others, but they're all going to need help. But you still have to maintain the classroom while you're helping the individual. Number 5, failure or neglect of the blackboard or whiteboard or whatever type of board you have, and supplementary reference materials and other teaching aids. So just failure to use the blackboard, supplementary reference materials, other teaching aids. Failure to use the blackboard, supplementary reference materials, and other teaching aids. Maybe I'm overstating this, but why would we do that? Because we have a textbook that we got to get through. If I'd use all this other stuff, it's just going to take me away from what I've got to get done. But that's not true. They're called aids, teaching aids, because they help you teach. You use the teaching aid and it helps you get through the material even quicker, hopefully, or it helps them understand better. And if they understand it better, they're going to be more prepared to understand the next lesson. Also, of course, chalkboards, the blackboard, it brings another dimension into their understanding. Okay? In a certain sense, if I were to write the outline that I have on the board, you would be using 2 senses to get what I have to say rather than just one. And it would be more interesting, even though if I were able to do it exactly the same. Let's say I had, do you guys know what I mean if I say like an overhead projector? If I had an overhead projector and could put it up there where you could see my point, and then I moved it along, or if I had a PowerPoint presentation that just put one thing out there at a time, then there's the visual and the audio, whatever. I get confused. Audible is a company, isn't it? But these things, these other aids, they help teach. Okay, so you say, Dr. Rowland, why don't you do that? I have a lot to do. Plus, you're such developed learners. You can pay attention in just one dimension or one skill, unless your eyes are going like this and your ears are closing. So, all right. So I'm not like Dr. Johnson necessarily, but we try to be a little lively. Reference materials. In that point, it talks about reference materials. See, if you are given an outline, you have to remember that's just an outline. That's one of the things that I don't like about outlines. Through the generations of teaching, many teachers get an outline and they think that is all that needs to be taught. Okay? And the outline is just like the skeleton. You are more than a skeleton. You have flesh on your bones. And your outline needs to have flesh on those bones. Needs to have material, information, stories, whatever it is, illustrations, other information that helps the students understand it, helps you understand it. And that's where your supplementary reference materials comes in. And anything else that's associated with it. It's more than just an outline. So, number 6. I don't know that this one's related to content material, but it is something that happens. Excessive use of stereotype expressions or habits. Excessive use of stereotype expressions or habits. Probably the biggest stereotype in a classroom is what? I don't know, I haven't studied it, but I'm just guessing. The easiest one that comes up already came up today. Right? Guys are smart, girls are dumb. I mean the other way around, right? Or is it the other way around? Girls are smart, guys are dumb. Okay, that's stereotype. The girls are the ones there sitting there, always paying attention, learning, and the guys are the ones just elbowing each other and just waiting to get out for recess. Okay, whatever. I mean, I just made that up, but that's a stereotype, isn't it? It's that type of thinking, that type of expression is stereotypical. Is there something wrong with using a stereotype? Not necessarily. A stereotype can also be what we would call a generality. Generalities are generally true, okay? But they have exceptions to them because they're not always true. But the stereotype, we say, okay, guys are always doing this. Well, are they always? No. Okay? But if we refer to that, if you use it once in a while, then it can be helpful. If you're always saying, oh, they're always guys. I always got to work with the guys. You guys are so dumb. I always have to tell you twice instead of the girls. Okay, that's a problem. It's going to become a bigger problem if you don't refrain from using stereotypical expressions and thought patterns all the time. Number 7, inattention to lighting and ventilation. I don't have to give a lot of talk about this. Inattention, not paying attention to lighting and ventilation. Sometimes there's not much you can do about it. But even if there's nothing you do about it, you can address it so that students know that you're aware of it. That we're both struggling with not enough light, or we're both struggling with it's really warm in here, or it's really cold in here, or something. But what can happen is that we're like, I got to get this lesson across, and the kids are really having a hard time paying attention because of the circumstances, and we don't even notice it because this lesson is really important. I got to get through it. So that's something to watch out for. So there's 30 on this list. So make sure every day before you go into class you review them and make sure that you don't do a single one of them. Number 8, complying only with suggestions from supervisors without demonstrating initiative and creativeness. Complying only with suggestions from supervisors without demonstrating initiative and creativity. Can you imagine you have a class? We already did that today, right? So we're back in that same class. We're in the same situation. Can you imagine this situation happening to you? How would you commit? What is it when you do a mistake? How would you make this mistake? I would never make this mistake. I've had your class. Sarah's like, I don't understand what he's talking about, or I can't figure this out.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't know how to give you an example.
Okay. So I'll accept that as she probably understands. Anybody else? Sarah's very expressive on her face. Okay, so you're a new teacher. Can you imagine that probably the principal will come and observe you teach? Okay? And when he gets done, he says, here's a couple of things you could work on. Okay? And you take and work on those things. But that's all you do. You don't think about, why did he suggest that? What problem am I having? Is there something else I could do so that the next time he comes, he doesn't see that problem? Okay? So you comply only with his suggestions. He says, why don't you try this or try this? And you do that, and either it works for you or it doesn't work for you, and you say, well, okay? And then he comes back and observes again, and if you only comply with suggestions and are not demonstrating initiative or creativity, you're going to have the same problems, pretty much. Maybe one thing was a way to pass in papers, and so now they pass in papers the way the principal suggested. But you haven't thought, how can I do this better myself? Is there something going on here that is there some process that I can invent, create? Okay. So that's the issue there. Again, is so consumed with what is the big thing for you as a beginning teacher that you don't step out and try other things or think about other types of things. Showing nervousness. Number 9, showing nervousness. Okay, the problem with that is not the nervousness, it's the showing it. You got a death grip on the lectern. You're not moving. It's right here. Or pacing. Now, there's nothing wrong with walking around while you teach. But if it's nervous pacing, it's going to be a problem. Fidgeting, wringing your hands, whatever. So, showing nervousness. Kind of be aware of what you do. With technology these days, it's not hard even to record yourself. Even if it's not, with smartphones and tablets and stuff, you could just set it up in the back, sit it on the desk, point it toward you, just let it record for what you do for an hour or two. And then that's easy to do. The hard part is going back to look at it. But just, be aware, especially if they think, man, I'm so nervous, and it seems like I'm doing stuff, but I can't even think about what I might be doing. Just set a phone up or something and record yourself and look at it. Number 10, using a weak or unsteady voice. Using a weak or unsteady voice. This isn't always new teachers, but normally a shy or a quiet teacher who's taught for a little while has learned that they need to speak up and make themselves clear. Have you ever listened to somebody who had a weak or unsteady voice? Maybe we probably have opportunities to hear people tell a story in your ministry, or that have, it's the first time, or they've not told very many stories, and they get up and they're very soft. Sometimes being soft works if it's a method, if it's a strategy, right? If you're just yelling, that's obnoxious too. Even though everybody can hear you, they're like, I don't want to hear this anymore. This is ugly. I don't care if it's interesting. I don't care if it's the Bible. It's ugly. It hurts, and I want out of here. Okay. But you could be soft and get everyone's attention. But if it's hard to listen, you don't, as a speaker or as a teacher, you're not thinking about helping your audience hear what you have to say. If you soften yourself to keep their attention and help them hear, that's one thing. If you're just soft and weak, then you're not helping them hear what you have to say. Number 11. Trying to be a regular guy or girl with the students before winning their respect. In what areas of school do you think this is the most likely to happen with a new teacher? Amanda?
High school,
In high school, why?
because you can probably be more on their level and try to teach them better that way. But
You might think that if you're like with them, they will listen to what you're saying. Is that what you're?
yeah,
Okay. All right. What, Sarah?
A lot of people are kind of the same age. I mean, they're very close in age, some of them.
There's not much age difference in high school. You graduate from college, and you get hired to teach English. Are you English?
Yes.
Okay. So you get hired to teach English, and you go to a school, and it's not a real big school, but you're going to teach 7th through 9th grade English and 10th through 12th grade English. How much older than those 12th graders are you going to be if it's the first year out of school?
Just a couple of years.
4 years? 5 years? Okay. And at that age, the difference between 17 and 22 is huge, I know, but it's not really. It's not really that far. It's a lot different than it's a lot, what am I trying to say? Imagine the difference between a 7-year-old and a 22-year-old. A lot bigger difference. So most teachers don't have a problem being a regular guy with the 3rd and 4th graders, right? We have a problem being a regular guy with the high schoolers. And one of the reasons is we think it might help us communicate with them. And another reason would be that the age is not that much different. And so it wasn't that far back in our memory when we were the same as them. In fact, it doesn't have to be 5 years ago. It might have been that we were acting like that even up until we were 20 or something like that. And maybe still, some of the things they really enjoy, you really enjoy. Right? So that's something to be careful of, especially. You cannot become a friend of your students. Okay? You can be friendly to them, but you can't become a friend of your student. There always has to be a teacher-student relationship. You can do things with them. Okay? You can take them to the basketball. You can go to the school basketball game with them. But when you're sitting there at the school basketball game with them, you're still their teacher. They're your student. I'm not saying that you cannot cheer or anything like that, but you don't shove and just let all the barriers down and it's like we're all buddies in the bleachers or in the stands or whatever. So, all right. Number 12. Assuming no responsibility for room appearance, bulletin boards, etc., whatever, decorations, all of that type of thing. You might say, well, that's the maintenance man's responsibility. I don't know how to fix that. You might not know how to fix it. But if you have a junky room, kids know it. You know it. If you think, this place is a dump, how are you going to be expressing yourself? What's your attitude going to be toward what you do if you think you work in a dump? Okay? You should take the initiative yourself. It's your classroom. Make it look nice. I'm not trying to brag on myself, but to a certain extent, I was doing that this morning. I'm finding hymnals all over the place. There's bottles of water. There's a metal chair up here and a metal chair over there, and and stuff all over. It still is a little messy, but it's way neater than when I first came in. I don't want to work with junk all over the place. Okay? And a beginning teacher needs to say, can't say, that doesn't matter. I just need to make sure I get my teaching across. It's gonna become oppressive. It's like, I just work in this dump. Look at that garbage over there, that garbage over there. All right, well, let's just go ahead and get to the lesson. Something like that. I don't know. So, all right, but assuming no responsibility for it. If you have a bulletin board in your classroom, it's not your responsibility to cover it up, and nobody covers it up. It's just like a blank bulletin board. Do something about it. Make it look nice. Make it brighten up your classroom. Make the classroom a nice place to go to school. Make the classroom a nice place to teach school. Even if it's just for yourself. Make it a nice place to teach. It's going to also be a nice place to learn. If there's stuff that maintenance needs to do, you figure out, make sure they know. They can't get to it right away. What can you do in the meantime to mitigate, to minimize the issue, the problem? Can you cover it up? Can you do something to it so that it just can at least clean up a little bit? If the carpet's coming up, is the strings all over the place, and you need new carpet. We can't put new carpet in. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. Well, you just cut those little strings off so that it's not a rat hole or whatever it is if there's strings all over the place. So, assuming no responsibility, that's 12. 13, assigning the pages of a textbook as a lesson. Say, all right, this is your lesson. Make sure you read through that, answer those questions, and don't forget you got a test. That's kind of like delivering an outline. Here's the points that you need to make sure you learn, answer the questions, and make sure you study, because if you don't study, you're going to have, we got a test coming up, and you don't want to get a bad grade on that test. Testing is not the only motivation to learn. In fact, it's kind of one of the worst motivations to learn. It's a base level motivation to learn. Okay? If I say everybody that gets a C on the test is going to get a candy bar, okay? So it's like, yeah, I like that. Why? Well, we're physical human beings. We like that. But have I encouraged you to become a learner by doing that? No, I've just encouraged you to learn certain things. Okay? And the test is the same way. The test is the negative motivation, right? We don't want to get a D on the test. Everybody that gets a D, I'm going to write their name on the board. Oh, I'm not going to get a D. Okay? They say, I would never write their name on the board. But the same thing. Okay? It's the same type of, it's just the severity of the negative response. You don't want a D, your parents are going to have to sign that paper. I'm not saying parents shouldn't sign Ds. They need to know what's going on in the classroom. But they need to know what's going on with their students. But if in your classroom the only motivation is this base level, and you're only given the driest outline, or you're reading through the textbook. I had a teacher that read through the textbook, and believe it or not, he was a beginning teacher. And I can't remember. I think he actually was given the assignment to teach just in the very last minute too. It was he studied a different subject and all that. I want to be as gracious or whatever to him as possible, but it was a terrible class. It was. I sat there and wrote the outline down. I was like a couple weeks ahead of him. It didn't take me long to figure out that he was this, Roman numeral 1 was the blue bold print, and capital letter A was the black bold print, and number 1 was the bold print at the beginning of the paragraph, and letter A was the italicized words in the paragraph. I mean, it wasn't that hard. I mean, I'm like a analytical type of guy. I like to break things down, and then I just started putting it back together in my own outline. See, I was doing higher order thinking there. Right? Analysis and synthesis. And what else is there? I'm trying to help you guys. I've never done this before. I'm on the top of my game today. What else is there? Higher order thinking. Analysis, synthesis, evaluation. I'm hearing. Those are the top 3. What's the bottom 3? Where do we start? The start is not higher order. The start is knowledge and then understanding or comprehension. And the last one that we haven't said, application. And all of that is part of whose taxonomy? Bloom's. Bloom's taxonomy of the cognitive domain. All right, people are doing frantic searches into their OneNote. Just put it up there. What's he talking about? Oh, there's the page with those notes. All right. Number 14. This is very similar to being a regular guy, and maybe I should consolidate this so I don't have 30 points, but I think I need to keep this one in so I have even 30. Number 14, adherence to Joe College habits. It's a little different in the sense that you're not necessarily trying to be a regular guy. You know how Joe College dresses in school, okay? Well, when Joe College is in college, okay, Mr. So-and-so is a teacher. He's out of college, okay? I say to all of our student teachers in orientation, are you a student teacher this year?
Next year.
Okay, so I have a little session with them in orientation, and I say, you know what, girls? Mostly for the girls, I want you to dress like your mom dresses. Okay. Now, I don't know what your mom dresses like, and maybe I don't want you to, but the generalization is you're not going. I don't want you to dress like a sophomore or junior or even a senior in college. You need to, the way you dress, you need to dress dignified. You're a teacher. You're not a student anymore. Even though you're a college student still, you're not a college student. You're a teacher, and you need to dress like a teacher. Okay? So, and guys have the same problem, especially the youth pastor that gets assigned to teach the Bible class. I don't know anybody this way. I'm just using my imagination. But he wants to be in with the teenagers, and he's got the blue shirt on and the sport coat and the brown tie, and he's just with it, I don't think this is with it. I don't think I look like a youth pastor. Maybe I do today. But when you're 45, you're allowed to dress a little bit younger. But when you're 22, you just got out of college, 25, how old are you, 22? 22, you just got out of college. Now, Rick, he dresses dignified, I think. He always has. It's just, I don't know, his grandpa or his parents reared him to be that way. But, and that's not, there's no, really not a compliment to him, just his parents. But, the youth pastor, he's all about having fun with the teens, and he wants to be relating with them all the time, and then he's not a teacher. There's stuff to teach, and he's like, we're having a great time in that Bible class, yeah, yeah, shooting ping pong balls and whatever. All right, so conservative, and maybe conservative is not the right word, dignified hairstyles, use of makeup, guys, dress styles, all of that, and vocabulary, that type of thing. Number 15, the constant use of incorrect grammar and of slurred word endings. Say, I'm not an English teacher. You're using English to communicate to your students. Use it correctly. Constant use of incorrect oral grammar and of slurred word endings. So, I've given you 15 characteristic mistakes of beginners. I'm going to stop there. There are 15 more. You're going to need to come up with 5. Pretty sure. So, I'm not saying, I said that the wrong way. You don't need to come up with 5. You need to remember 5. Okay. Yeah, see, it wasn't incorrect grammar, but it was incorrect communication. You don't need to come up with 5. You don't need to, snatch my notebook out of my arms and see if you can get 5 of the next 15. Just remember 5 of them. Okay? So, is there something here that I really want to talk about? That's there. Actually, as much as beginning, let me give you this one. If you care, I don't think it matters, but this is number 19, failing to know the subject matter. As much as we are often very concerned about the subject matter, sometimes we don't know it as well as we ought to. Now, so you have to know your material. Most of the time, you're not going to have a problem knowing your material in an English class or a math class or a science class, something like that, because those classes really build upon one another, and you've had more than the students have, and you probably know your material. But Bible and history class, those are real wide. And you'll have a student who just loves this topic or whatever. His dad was, he's been reading biographies since he was 2.5 or something, And the Bible, maybe, you haven't been in that church. You just came to that church. And this church, they have, an extensive Sunday school program, and the preacher is so good that even the Sunday night sermons, the kids understand, and they're doctrinal wizards, okay? And you're getting up and you're trying to teach, and they know it all already. Okay? You have to know it all too. Otherwise, you're going to get questions from them, and they're going to think, what kind of questions are these? And all of a sudden, they're in control of the class and not you. So knowing your material is important, especially if you end up with like a history or Bible type class. Okay, so all these things. Almost all these things are connected to the idea of managing the classroom. These characteristic mistakes end up in having a not well-managed classroom. Maybe not mismanaged, but it's rowdier and not as controlled or managed as it should be.